start to record. So here we are with what's left of the Northwest AGI forum, and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, how's that look, everybody?
Good.
Okay. So why don't I just get started, and I'll try to breeze through this, and then we should have enough time to talk about it. And this is the kind of the part two of the judgment series, which part one was pre-Chat GPT in 2022, and for that I basically did research using this Blackwell Handbook of Judgment and Decision Making. And if you want, you can check out the slides or the video. Anyway, just I'm going to go over some of the highlights, what I consider to be some of the highlights of my research into this. And one thing that came up that I thought was interesting was that in general, people tend to be overconfident in decisions, which isn't really a surprise. But a lot of times when you read things and it's backed up by a psychological study, it makes it a little more believable. It's not just something somebody says. But typically we tend to rely too much on our inner view of reality, and we don't often, or we don't always check with the facts, the outer evidence, if you will. Excuse me, I was shouldn't be playing around with this. And did you say something, Jim? I thought I heard somebody. Never mind.
No, I did. My chair creaks, and I didn't realize I was still on audio. But
okay, chair creaks. All right.
So, I do have a question, Mike. I have a question. Rockwell. You were saying something, Rockwell, about judgment.
Yeah, I'll send it to you later. Why don't we just?
Okay.
I'll go through my presentation, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send it to you later. It's pretty good. But anyway, there was in the 70s, there was a heuristics and biases movement, which kind of was the center of research in those days. And heuristics, I mean, basically it showed heuristics are fast, but you might just overlook something important. I mean, they do work fast, but I mean, they have drawbacks to them. And biases, there's lots of biases. Another thing I thought was interesting is that often when people select some choice, they concentrate only on the benefits and kind of ignore the negative aspects. And the reverse also applies. So if you're not going to accept, you don't want a certain car or something, well, you might say, well, I don't like the tires, but you might ignore the other things you actually like. So we tend to be imbalanced. And satisficing is a term invented by, I believe, Alan Newell in the good old-fashioned AI days, which basically says that if you're going to make some decision, just pick the first one that meets your requirements. It doesn't have to be optimal. That's satisficing. So the upshot of the heuristics and biases movement, to me, was, or that I read that was interesting anyway, out of that volume, was that decision making is prone to systematic errors, which again is not a big surprise, but when you see it shown with studies, it makes it a little bit more clear. And basically a lot of AI, at least, we're using human beings as the measuring instrument, the training data. But the problem is we're not gold standards at all. Kahneman was it's kind of the biggest figure in judgments, the science of judgment and decision making. And I like this phrase: mind is a kind of measuring instrument. So you can kind of envision your mind measuring, and that makes sense if it's a judgment. And then he classed things into what we agree about and what we disagree about. And what we agree about is typically and should be the facts. And we also agree that if somebody makes a really dumb, stupid, crazy decision, we agree about that. But the interesting part for AI for me is bounded disagreements. I mean, if it's a true matter of judgment, then we all allow for bounded disagreement. So that really means one AI could be different from another. And I think that's an important point. It seems like so much of the testing done now is just whether it works or not, but it's not quite that simple, I don't think. There's three types of judgment classifications: descriptive, how people actually make judgments, which probably won't be that great; normative, how they ought to make judgments. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. And a prescriptive judgment is basically an action. It's a judgment about some kind of action you want to undertake to get from the poor judgment to the good judgment, poor being descriptive and good being normative. So I'm just going to wrap up my review. And there's kind of a contrast that I can see, and hopefully you guys can too. I mean, one of this, I got this sentence out of that same book, and it says, conceive of individual decision makers not as faulty maximizing agents, but as fundamentally different creatures. We're not optimizers. We're not performing internal calculus. I'm not saying that some judgment is pretty good, but it's not really balanced, systematic, consistent in a way that you'd like to see AGI, or at least I would. So I'm moving on now. I'm going to make three points. The first one is that I think it's important to distinguish between fact and judgment, because I think this gets lost a lot. And a starting point is basically, it seems like researchers, the world, whoever, classifies sentences, utterances in three different ways: the imperative, the interrogative, and the declarative. Imperative is like close the door. It's a command. It's a goal. Interrogative being is the door closed? Declarative being the door is closed. So that we're concentrating really on the third one here, the declarative type of utterance of sentence, which is basically some kind of claim about reality. Now, a fact should be verifiable and often has a true, clear, or false value. I mean, if you can't verify it, it's just your opinion, pretty much. And in some cases, you say, a judgment could become a fact. Like you might say, I think next week it's going to rain all week, and it rains all week, so it becomes a fact. And fact checking comes up a lot with the current fake news problem. And just out of interest, I kind of took a look at so if I was a reporter, how would I check facts? And you look at public records, interviewing the source, and do things like check fact checking websites. A judgment, on the other hand, is typically going to have more than one possible value. So really, that's the cardinal feature of a judgment, that it could be this, it could be this, could be that. And if you see something like good, so-and-so says it's good, bad, right, wrong, important, unimportant, unjust, that tips you off that it's a judgment. Now, as we know, a lot of people pass off their opinions as facts. And so it's easy to mix these things up, but there you have it. One of the books that I read, which is about 5 years old, in doing this research, is called The Promise of Artificial Intelligence by Brian Cantwell Smith, whose basic theme throughout the whole book was a contrast between mere computation and a judgment. And I don't think he never really quite established what a judgment was, but basically and I think he's got the same problem that I do, that neither one of us actually understand how it would fit into an AI AGI system. But his claim is that yes. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. It's hard to recognize whether a judgment, or what percentage of the system is actually a judgment, and what's a fact. And you might not even, buried deep beneath the system, there might be a haphazard combination of facts and judgment. And I would claim pretty much that depending upon the training data that large language models use, that's basically the situation with large language models. So NARS, on the other hand, NARS is one of the kind of the canonical older AGI type AGI systems that most people have heard of, that have hung around long enough, and it deals with three types of statements as well, basically that coincide with the three types of utterances I mentioned earlier: goals, questions, and judgment. So the part that interests us is the judgment part, and basically the main upshot of why I bring this up is that in NARS there is never any facts, really. There's just increasing values of likelihood. So the problem of whether or not an AI system has facts or judgments is kind of nullified by the way Pei Wang approached this. So I mean, it's pretty interesting and relevant. I mean, and in an LLM, I don't know how they can't really distinguish between the two. So to wrap up my first point, facts should be verifiable. You might have a hard time determining a fact versus a judgment. Most of our thinking involves some kind of mixture of facts and judgments, and like I mentioned, it's going to be hard to tell what's going on inside the machine. So basically, the point of this is that it's important because we need the AI to view the world in an accurate fashion, and if it's mixing up facts and judgments in some kind of fashion, how well do we know it's working? Second point I want to bring up, and I'm just kind of breezing through these slides. I'm not. You guys can read these slides later if interested and ask me questions. But I view intelligence as kind of a combination of understanding, reasoning, and judging. So, and that's kind of comprehensive in a way. You can kind of roll up any kind of issue, problem, whatever you have under one of those three headings, and they all combine and integrate and conflate. But we did a study of understanding, and one of the just as a basic definition, I picked out Brett Martinson's because I liked it, and he says understanding is having in-depth knowledge of the subject domain such that one can reasonably reapply it. Detailed, understand the underlying principles. Space-time, structural and functional, cause and effect, relational, so you can teach, explain, recognize. I mean, all these different verbs down there. I mean, basically, think of a car mechanic or a doctor or whatever, constantly applying their understanding. So that's just kind of a basic definition. But now, so how does that relate to judgment? And I mean, if you don't understand what's going on, it's hard to make a judgment. But I mean, it's kind of a common sense type of thing. And that also in the psychological literature, if I'm not mistaken, often they kind of class things under a mental act or a mental state, and it's kind of analogous to a Turing machine in that the Turing machine's in a certain state, and then based upon what I forget what happens, but the read-write head moves and makes an act, and the tape advances. And so the similarities, of course, between psychology and computer science are pretty well known. But the reason I mention this is that the book, which I used for part of my research, called Making Sense of the World, which is kind of a collection of essays on understanding. Basically, they're saying understanding's, it's not just this state where you reach, I understand, but it's also like, okay, I'm trying to understand. Now the reason why I think that's important in relation to judgments is because you have to make a lot of judgments in the creative act of understanding. So see what I mean? It's kind of hard to talk about one of these without some of the other ones. And again, reasoning. What reasoning is. You use your existing knowledge to generate some new knowledge, and typically we look at reasoning as deduction and induction. Induction mostly being learning, and this is well known and well studied. Good old fashioned AI was a bunch of inference engines. And so how does that affect judgments? Well, if your judgments are not sound and they're really based on, primary, first principles that are pretty well known. If your judging is not sound, you're going to get, excuse me, if your reasoning is not sound, then you're going to get poor judgments. So that's kind of how I see, at least one aspect of the relation. And I'm a Hegel fan. He's the reason I like Hegel is because he integrates all these different aspects of reality into a kind of a whole, and he puts induction, deduction, and judgment all together into the same totality. You'd have to. We could talk about this later if you're interested, but anyway. So to wrap up my second point, and it looks like we're going to have a lot of time to discuss. I like to think of thinking as understanding, reasoning, and judging. It seems like everything can kind of roll up under those. But really, the reason that judging is so important is that a machine could do something other than what it did. So it's variable. And that's how we would really judge the machine's, how well it's doing its judgment. So, okay. Now to my third theme, which I really, what is a true judgment for a human in an AGI? And this has puzzled me for a long time, and I sat and thought about this, and I read about it for a long time, and I think I'm at least clarifying it. But one issue that comes up a lot in judgments is intuition. So, we all know what intuition is, but I really like this quote which most people know or have heard at some point, from Justice Stewart of the U.S. Supreme Court. He's talking about whether or not or how he can recognize pornography, and blah 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 blah. I know it when I see it, and the motion picture involved in this case is not that. So this is the highest judge, short of God himself, herself, or whatever, that you can get, who is saying, okay, my logical I know it when I see it. So intuition clearly has an important role to play in this. And another source of intuition's research, I guess, I don't know if you could classify what I'm doing as research. I don't, but maybe if I wrote a archive paper, you could, but I prefer this medium. Anyway, The Gift of Fear by De Becker, which is a long treatment of his main theme, which is basically, how to avoid violence. And he basically argues to the whole book, really, that people already know when it's about to happen. They just don't trust their own instincts, their own intuition. Somehow I knew, he says. Anyway, you can read that later if you want. Another issue that comes to my mind a lot, with respect to what I'm calling true AI judgments, is free will. So I copied this from Wikipedia. It seems pretty good. The notional capacity or ability to choose between different possible courses of action unimpeded. So I'm going to have vanilla ice cream, chocolate ice cream, strawberry ice cream. And we can shift arbitrarily to these different judgments. Now, can a machine shift just as easily? Well, I don't know. Or should it? I don't know. So, thinking about this some more, and there's Kahneman, who I mentioned earlier, and a lot of people know, is famous for his System 1 and System 2 thinking, which most people have heard of at some point. System 1 being that kind of, I know it when I see it, it's a heuristic, I've got a gut feeling about it, I don't have to think about it. System 2 is when you have to sit back and think about it. So it seems to me, though, that these are both operating concurrently a lot, and also with an element of free will. So, if I wanted to, just as okay, what's a true AI judgment? Well, it's all of this. probably. I sketched up some possible criteria for an AI judgment. Obviously, if it's an easy problem, we're not going to get very excited about it at this stage of AI history. But not a lot of problems aren't so simple. I mean, if the AI is faced with not much objective evidence, impartial, incomplete evidence, this is what Pei Wang had envisioned with his NARS. And suppose there's no directly applicable training data, that zero shot is the hip word to use. There's no directly applicable hard-coded roles. It might be difficult to use reinforcement learning. So, I mean, reinforcement learning works for a lot, but I mean, sometimes you don't even know the outcome. No, maybe there's just no means of judging it or assessing it for a while, if ever. True AI judgment. I mean, if a human was making the same judgment, we might have lots of biases. We might rely on our intuition a lot and have a lot of emotions about it. So here I just sketched up, okay, this would probably count as a true AI judgment, some combination of this. And now I'm almost done, but so here's kind of, really, to me, the upshot of this, my research, if you want to call it that, is there should be a difference between human judgment and AGI judgment based upon, the arguments I presented. And there's a lot of talk about human level AI. Sure, we want that, but anyway, I mean, human judgment, well, it's inconsistent. We place too much emphasis on this, not enough on that. We're inside our minds too much, relying on, quick firing heuristics when maybe we should take some more time and look the situation over. And, but a human being, I mean, we get a lot of stuff right too. AGI, a greater balance, I think, more emphasis on the outer, trying to make up for some of those shortcomings I mentioned earlier. And bias, I mean, there is a role for bias. I realize that's maybe possibly a good bias, but it should be clear to the user, and facts and judgment should be distinguished. It seems like intuition is subconscious. So if there's intuition in the AGI, it should be made explicit and explainable. And, free will, well, I mean, there's arguments about whether we're deterministic or not. I don't think we should get into that, but, I guess to me, it should at least be consistent. So, I know like with LLMs, there's a temperature control. You can make it more or less consistent. So that kind of thing. So here's some, it looks like, a half an hour left. If you guys want to discuss this. Whatever comes to your mind related to this, is intuition incomputable? I saw a company the other day named Intuition Engine, I think, but maybe they're working on it. But it seems like there's some components of intuition that are still necessary for real judgment, and some aspect of free will that I can shift. And what are some positive elements, of heuristics and negative? These kinds of things. So for the next session, I want to, obviously this is not a new art form, so I want to look at, the classic decision-making algorithms and some more contemporary methods. But anyway, here's some potential discussion. Thank you, Oliver. He doesn't understand. All right. Okay. So anybody have any comments? Somebody gave up.
Yeah, no, I have comments. So, but I can't react to everything you said because I can't possibly recall everything that you just said. I have my own opinions, and I think, for instance, well, first of all, there's one thing you just said. I think LLMs do show, neural networks do show intuition, and it's just too much intuitiveness, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's not human intuitiveness because we have more we have we have more emphasis on different layers of abstraction and reasoning and stuff like that, different experiences. Uh, Also, one thing I do want to say though, and this is my main theme, is that I think we need more discrete. Oh, there are two things I want to say. We need more discrete methods to keep track of our reasoning, and AGI really needs that. I think it's important to at least have the potential to give AGI the ability to explain itself in a really in a valid method. And so the current state of the art GPT is not able to do that, as far as I can
Well,
tell.
they run tests on reasoning benchmarks, so it's being done. But again, that it's still there's still like usually a limited set of correct answers where a judgment, in my mind, can take on more than one value. But I think I agree with your statement. It is mostly intuition, it seems like. I mean, deep learning. You train deep learning to look at a woman with a tennis racket. It behaves like intuition. Like, okay, that's
It's
a
like
woman in a tennis racket. You don't get any explanation for why unless you want to peer into the black box. So
it's
yeah,
it's like it's like a kind of intuition, but human
kind of,
intuition is
yeah.
different in a lot of ways. So, it's sort of both true and not true.
Well, I was going to bring up that same theme of intuition. On human intuition, it's not necessarily explainable. And you alluded to that, some of your examples of like, I don't know why I don't trust this guy, or I don't know why.
Right.
And why would we think that true AGI intuition would be explainable? And I sort of feel like if it was explainable, it'd be something other than intuition at the same level.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I was just thinking that for the benefit of the user, if the machine cannot explain why it did something, it just says why I know it when I see it.
Yeah. Would we accept
But
that?
I mean, I think you're right too. I mean, that's it seems like a question because if there's some ineffable component to it.
Well, that's an old argument for neural networks. We don't know how we come to a decision. Why should a computer program know? And I don't agree with it because, if we were to map out a decision process and to study it, we could figure it out. And so I have a lot of reasons for saying what I'm saying right now, but it would bore you, so I'm not going to say it. So, do you understand what I'm saying?
But in that Justice Stewart quote, I mean, do you think that could potentially be explained? I mean,
I think ultimately there has been some kind of definitive explanation, but
I could
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but yeah.
Yep.
But I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's probably a a little uncomfortable example to
well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, the specific example we'll leave on the table, but just I know it when I see it, kind of the human.
I could come up with better descriptions of pornography, but partly because I'm an artist and I paint nudes, so I can say, "Oh, that's not porn," but it comes to a relative point of view.
It may have also been
say like any piece of art, I like this or I don't, is sort of an intuitive, based on my something internal. I have this gut reaction of I like this work or I don't, or music or art, whatever. And it's hard to imagine that reaction, my reaction to this artist style as I like it or I don't like it, and me coming up with like reasons why.
Yeah.
That's true for some points of view, but I can start as an artist. I can start to give reasons why I like a particular kind of art and I don't. Now, but there is certainly, it's a point of view. my point of view underlies a lot of my, impressions, my responses.
Yeah, I think, Ken, what you were saying, it kind of makes me think again that an AGI and a human probably shouldn't be, equivalent. That we have certain properties like, I like this art form. I mean, why put that into a machine?
Or why have the expectation? Or well, like in the classic, mortgage and loan approvals or not, if you have, that AGI managing that, and they say, well, you're denied, and ultimately, they give all these reasons, and then maybe, it's not clear. There's an intuitive jump somewhere in there. Would we accept that?
Exactly. Yeah.
But a human does. There's no denying that humans have some level of intuition in even a proceduralized judgment. But would we accept that from an AGI?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very good point. I think. I think the answer is we wouldn't accept it.
Wait a minute.
We'd accept it. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
But I think an important part of this is that an AGI should be able to give good reasons why it makes the decisions. And we should, for instance, if you're rejected or I have a monitor in my car, which is going to give me a discount if I do everything according to what they want me to do. And there's one thing that I disagree with the monitor. So I think I should be able to talk to an artificial intelligence program and say, wait a minute, why are you going to charge me a higher rate just because I believe in putting on the brakes? I'm not going into a slide or anything like that. I'm not doing anything dangerous. I'm just coming to a braking, and I think the AGI should be able to start to give me reasons. Well, we found that drivers who do this are often and not braking in time or something like that. I think so. I would want to be able to have a discussion with an artificial intelligence program, even about the example that you just gave, and at least something before the human has to intervene and say, well, we'll take your comments under consideration or something.
Yeah.
You understood what I said, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking about that.
I've got pay by the mile insurance, but it's not the one that judges your driving. They don't seem to care. Anyway, well,
you've got paid. I'm sorry, but that's interesting. Okay, I'll remember that. So I did write some notes down. Oh, now another thing is understanding is in-depth knowledge. You were saying, and it's bounded by relative discussion. Understand, in my opinion, it's in-depth knowledge, but bounded by relative discussion. So if we want to talk about jet engines, we don't need to be experts in jet engine technology, but we have some, we've read things about jet engines, some fundamental.
Oh yeah. I just gave out one example that I got out of a couple of years ago. We did that survey, and and the point that I was trying to make is that it's hard to distinguish the understanding from a judgment because they're so mixed up, and that in fact in all of AI everything is integrated and combined, and it's all whenever you venture into some kind of abstraction, you're already at some kind of a deficit because you have to consider everything else nearly. Well,
I always think in your example of the knowledge, I think the one thing that differentiates a human, say a judge in a case or something, or even just asking a judge, a human with good reasoning will know where their knowledge base ends, and then be able to, ask questions, be able to pursue, and find that, acquire at least sufficient knowledge to get to the judgment. And I think that would be, I think that's I don't want to say it's like the example of the AI hallucination going on now, but that would be a bellwether indicator of an AGI that knows where its gaps are and asks to build its knowledge before making a judgment.
Yeah.
And maybe that's not relevant if we imagine that the AI already has access to vast knowledge, more knowledge than in the individual. But I think that's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Well, guys, we have kind of a short, a small group. Do you want to wrap it up, or anybody have any other thoughts?
Oh,
I'll look for
so
your meetings. Have you not been having as many, or Mike?
Well, it kind of has tapered off. I've been trying to breathe some more life back. I mean, AI has changed so much in the last few years. So the last year, really. So we had an in-person meetup in Seattle, and hopefully in January next month we'll have with the Hugo Latipi of Cisco Systems a presentation on vision AI. So that's on the books for next month.
Okay.
So check back there. Yeah.
so what about the old members of the group? Did you write them and they're not here? Is that all that happened? Did you email them?
Usually I spend a fair amount of time promoting, but if I'm presenting, I don't promote that much. I don't know why. It's one of those psychological things. I guess I'm afraid a lot of people will show up.
Well, there were like 22 people. Because I had to get to the link right before I joined. Yeah, 22 signed up, and it's not unusual for a good third or more to not show up. But I was surprised that just a few of us. So I always look forward to these because you have good topics, and you have a good collection of people that join. So
well, thanks. If you've got something you want to present, you could.
I might, yeah.
The next one, I want to keep working on judgments, like I had indicated, and because there's a lot of old research into this too, and and newer research, and I'm not really up to date on that.
I'm really interested in reasoning because reasoning seems to me something that's more practical, that we can actually try something, even if it's not great. And for instance, if a person wanted to use ChatGPT, you can program off of ChatGPT and you can try your own models of reasoning if you're that ambitious. But
sort of related. Well, actually, I'm not going to try and find the article while we're talking, but I think it was in Science. They had an article recently that is sort of tangent to this, but it was basically to the effect of the legal, how they word it. It's basically, when is an AGI a legal entity?
Right.
And it fascinates me because then in some of these questions, like your reasoning one of like, I'm getting charged and I want to ask, it sort of brought up the idea that if the AGI is sort of a procedural kind of thing, then there must be a human entity behind it, like the insurance company behind it, that's the legal, has the legal responsibility for a decision. And when do we cross the point where the AGI would have, it would be the legal entity? It would, and the same like in art, right now, what is it? They in pictures that an AI can't. Only the human behind the AI can submit an artwork for a contest or something. It was, I want to say 6 months ago or something like that. That happened. And so when do we recognize the AGI as an entity itself with a legal boundary and a, you know, an ownership and you know, an individuality distinct from any human connected to it. I find that I don't know the answers, but I think the question just begs a lot of, like, you know, how
Yeah.
you approach these topics.
Human beings also can use other people's artworks or writing to inspire them. But the difference is that human beings aren't supposed to be copying word by word, one section, even one section. They're supposed to be writing it in their own terms, or at least trying,
Right.
or painting their own impression or whatever perception,
Yeah.
something, their own
Well,
style.
there's boundaries, legal boundaries of
Yeah.
how much they can reuse, and so.
Yeah, because there are some artists who do, for instance, it's almost cut and paste. And you come into question, is that really an original artwork? And so then you have these it's similar to the question that we're asking, about AGI is this really thinking, or is you're just cutting and pasting and recombining and so
Yeah.
on? So it's really difficult to say with artificial intelligence because they not only use cut and paste, but then they're using blurring and moving images and stuff like that. So it's really gets complicated after a while to try to make that charge. They're using my images. No,
Yeah.
it's not quite true.
Do you recognize that news item? I want to say it was a piece of art that was submitted to a public contest, but they insisted on a human name being attached to it instead of.
Oh,
I've
yeah, that
that in the
was
court.
some time ago, but I don't
Yeah.
remember anything about it.
Yeah.
No, the one I was thinking was an AI cannot be named as the inventor of some, like,
Oh yeah, that
AI
too. Yeah.
cannot take out a patent. I've heard of that one.
Like in the medical field. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. So it'd
Yeah,
be
it's a great, I mean, I think, Ken, what you're describing is that at what point does it become its own legal entity is really interesting, and it comes, it has direct applicability with whether or not it can make a judgment for itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like all the AIs, they are making judgments, but they're kind of sneaky in terms of just not saying, how they came up with the judgment. You can keep asking them, well, why do you think this? And it'll regurgitate some more, the grounds for the judgment. But
well,
it's
the
still
companies.
it's quite deterministic. There's no element of free will,
But ultimately, if it was making bad decisions, like a bad medical prescription recommendation or something, there's a human organization behind that would be legally responsible for any damages. And like if you cause,
yeah,
like Tesla with the driving, it's the
Yeah.
company
Yeah.
itself is responsible for the safety of that auto driving. Uh, and I think AGI is a long time. We're a long way away from AGI being a self-contained legal entity, but it's a type of question that I like because it forces the question of what are
what
where
criteria?
we are, what would be the steps to get there.
Yeah, when it's truly autonomous,
Yeah.
apart from the company back there, behind the curtain pulling the strings. Yeah.
So, do you think that the various Chat GPT models being are the responses that they give to secondary questions are being inhibited by the corporations or obscured in some way by the corporations?
Well,
You were saying,
they train them so that they, for example, don't say offensive things, and they
but I don't.
there's a reward scheme that they use. I guess
Yeah, do you think they're being trained not to give more precise answers? For instance, because they do quote sources when they give responses, though.
well, you can always train your own and see what happens. I mean,
I don't know how do they train the GPT to not give, like, all of a sudden descend into a Nazi personality, and
I had one started to, I was asking questions. I was using Bing Chat GPT, and I started asking questions about Microsoft, and I didn't mean them to be, I wasn't attacking Microsoft. And I can't remember all its responses, but it started telling me, I don't think that question is right,
Yeah,
as if I was saying
that's
something.
very common. I mean, they're erring on the side of caution big time. And
And then it
I don't know,
finally told me,
does anybody use
me,
Claude AI? I mean, it's become half of the responses are, I'm not comfortable with that.
right, right, right.
Man,
And
like
then
I copied it. I wanted it to update one of my firewall rules. I said, how do you change this? Because I wanted to make it a little bit more general. It was, oh, I want to, no, I can't, because it thinks I'm trying to hack somebody's system.
yeah,
You know.
it's like human. I take the fifth. I take the fifth.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, open AI, they're not really open as people know. I mean, but there are some that are open, and there's tons of papers out there, and I've been busying myself reading them. Basically, I mean, it's you get like a generic model to start off with, just trained on a mass of data, and then it's fine tuned with a lot of prompts and expected answers, so that it alters its weights, so that the answers that it gives are more going to be more aligned with what the company wants it to do. So it's not just going to predict the next word for anything.
How do you know that though?
But just read the papers. I mean, there's tons of papers that are coming out like wildfire. I mean, I haven't really built one myself, because it just seems like it would take a while. But anyway, well, guys, you want to call it quits for the day?
Well, I'm sorry that we're disappointing you, because I thought
Well,
it
you
was
keep talking if you want. I just thought.
Oh, I do have a suggestion. Is maybe you should try to have these meetings like once a month on some sort of schedule. That probably won't work either, but have it, or once every 2 months, and see if you can get the old crowd back, or whatever crowd.
Yeah, I mean, we can try it.
Unless you don't want to. Huh?
What was that?
If this is something that you want to do, I mean, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
well, of course I do, but I think to some extent I mean, the game's changed a lot in the last year, and the AGI per se, the AGI is not coming from the traditional AGI community.
Yeah.
It's coming right from the mainstream ML crowd. And so I think probably some people think of AGI as just so much bullshit, but
I think
I
so
don't.
too.
I think it's still relevant. But I mean, obviously, you know, so if people, we have to pay attention to what actually works, and what's working is large language models, large multimodal models and they look like AGI too, I think.
Well, and that's why the discussion, it's worth having the discussion. It looks like it works. It looks like it's AGI,
Yeah.
but is it really under the covers? Does it meet like the topics today? Would you trust it to make these kind of judgments? And we're getting close, but I think it needs a lot of critical review.
I agree too with that.
The other question is, if an AI program has more capabilities of doing the human kinds of judgment that we're trying to talk about, is that going to be a bad thing? Because it's going to give it more power.
Yeah, I don't know. There's always people that are just so worried about handing off more power to AI. I just think it's great. Yeah, that's what I've been waiting for.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing.
The problems out there are like drones killing people and stuff like that. That's where the problem.
AI powered drones would be. That could be a scary phenomenon. But it also makes me think of what do they call it in finance? The rapid trading. the algorithmically drive trading that can buy and sell, multiple times in a minute. So that's an example of AI taking over and sort of transforming an industry beyond what most individuals can match.
Yeah.
Not sure long term if that was a good or bad thing to do.
Well, there's also a possibility that drives liquidity. Right now, I don't think it is. I don't think automated trading is driving liquidity. It's sort of pumping it up and down, but it could be something that happens.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like the real danger lately has been coming from like FTX, that kind of out of control. And people worry about AI a lot causing problems. It's the people causing the problem.
Well, AGI is going to give more power to people who don't know how to do things. So they're not,
Well, that's the
they're
point,
not.
though. I mean,
Yeah, so that's a problem.
yeah,
There's no
I
question.
agree with you. Yeah, sorry, Jim. You're right in that regard. It is a problem. I guess there's so much doomsaying going on. I tend to tune it out though. But yeah, you're right.
Oh, so you started talking, Mike, you started talking about other this Zoom meetings that you were part of, that you were attending. And so you weren't happy with them because people didn't understand. You've learned something about LLMs attending other meetings, right?
Oh yeah, you can get all kinds of current information from there's lots of Zoom meetings you can go to. I didn't say I was disappointed. It's but I think what's interesting, what's going on now, like people like us that have been following AI for a long time, is how much people are just piling in and trying to capitalize on the gold rush. And in a way, it's a little sad that the traditional AGI community is being kind of ignored. But then again, that's the breaks of the game if you don't really come up with AGI. And
That's right. Yeah.
Sam Altman's got 1 year of college, and he's got his transformer. It's not it's kind of it's just not, there's not very much, but he's a great man. He's doing a great job, but he's on the headlines of the New York Times. We're not.
Yeah.
But I think I've been following AI since before he was born.
Have you guys read there? I'll put it in the chat text here. There's a paper from Steve Wolfram, who's Wolfram Research and stuff.
Yeah.
So he has a paper. What is ChatGPT doing, and why does it work? It's like if it printed out, it's like 80 pages, but overall, it's one of the best explanations of step by step.
Yeah. I'll read it.
Yeah. I'll look at it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's very good. And he has steps in there sort of in the ties back to the intuition stuff. He has steps in there. They talk about waiting, and he says, we do it this way. No one knows why, but it works better.
Right.
And I sort of like the candor of that, of like, this isn't 100% engineering. Sometimes it's just a tweak, and this tweak works better than that tweak. And so I'd be interested if you agree with that approach. But overall, I thought it was a really good description of from the low to the high of LLMs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I'll take a look. I've been looking out for more coverage. The best way to learn something is just to dive in and start working on it. But reading helps.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Why don't we call it a day? Thanks a lot for everybody. And
thanks, Mike.
I'm not sure when the next one's gonna. Well, the next one's should be in January.
So are you going to try, what are you going to try to do? You're going to try to keep going on this discussion about judgment, I think it is.
I want to keep going AGI for the rest of my life. So if just you two guys show up and Baker, that's fine.
Okay.
See you later.
All right.
Okay, so long. Thank you.